From the first time I saw this ad, I couldn't decide whether it was incredibly effective or just pure cringe.
I am on the fence about whether this actually moves anybody.
Welcome to Political Experts React, where we break down political ads in media, explain what the people behind them are trying to accomplish, and decide whether or not they did a good job. I'm Dan Pfeiffer, former communications director for Barack Obama. Joining me today is Alex Wagner, the host of Alex Wagner Tonight on MSNBC. This episode of Political Experts React is brought to you by ZBiotics, your first drink for a better tomorrow. Alex Wagner, welcome back to Political Experts React. It's been 4 years since you've been on the show.
Are you serious?
4 years. The last time we were on the show was in the middle of a climate apocalypse. It was orange outside my house, yes.
That's right.
Yes, which means I've been doing the show for 4 years, which I don't know what that says.
I must have done terribly. It's like 4 years. I was exiled.
You were doing a Crooked Media podcast on the pandemic at the time you did this. That's why we had you on, was to help promote that Crooked Media podcast. And look where you are now, primetime television star.
It's because of the Crooked Media stuff.
Well, many people say that. They said, you know what, we didn't really think she was going anywhere. And then she did that podcast and whew, to the moon.
He owes it to Crooked Media.
Let's get down to business here. The first ad we're going to watch is from a group put forward by California Governor Gavin Newsom, and the ad's on abortion.
We're almost there. You're gonna make it.
Trump Republicans want to criminalize young Alabama women who travel for reproductive care.
Miss, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, take a pregnancy test.
Stop them by taking action at righttotravel.org. Campaign for Democracy Group is responsible for the content of this advertising.
From the first time I saw this ad, I couldn't decide whether it was incredibly effective or just pure cringe. What do you think?
So I think it's like 75% effective, 25% cringe. The cop with the Clear Blue Easy test, maybe slightly cringy, but I find it quite resonant. Largely because the prohibition in some states that's prohibiting women from crossing state lines to seek out-of-state abortions is honestly one of the most appalling and under-discussed developments in this year, 2024 of our Lord. It is the most Handmaid's Tale aspect of all of this sort of reproductive freedom crackdown, the idea that women cannot leave the state, that they are effectively prisoners, not only in their own bodies now, but in their own states. And so for that reason, I think it highlights a really, really draconian and politically powerful issue for Democrats. So in that way, I think it's really good. I just wish that the cop wasn't so central casting, he's like out of Fargo or something.
Part of the task that Democrats have in this election is to make people who live in states that don't currently have an abortion ban have reason to fear what is coming. To highlight some of these very, as you say, Handmaid's Tale-like examples, it's talking about a federal abortion ban. Gavin Newsom is clearly looking for ways in which he can use his platform to have an impact in this election, right? He's clearly sitting in California wanting to do a lot. He's like trying to debate people. He's putting up billboards places. And so,
yes.
But it's good, right? It's better that than just sitting back waiting for 2028, right?
He is one of the only Democrats out there who plays on the same turf as Republicans in terms of really going for the jugular, and I think he has the facts in his favor, right? Republicans paint dire portraits of the border being overrun in an American apocalypse. That is not happening, and immigrants are not poisoning the blood of this country. But Republican legislatures and Republican justices are very much changing the way women control their own bodies and the way that, interstate travel could be conducted if Trump is reelected. And I think if you're living in a blue state and you haven't been paying as much attention to something like this, it's the kind of thing that makes you maybe even Google, like, what are they even talking about? It is not nationally understood the degree to which they are policing women, quite literally, from taking control of their own uteruses.
To Newsom's credit, he has, more than most Democrats, a very modern understanding of the media environment, what breaks through. The idea of this ad is created for the purposes of people like us talking about it, people in our lives sharing it. It's not just for the people who actually see it on television. I think that's smart. That's what you're supposed to do. The only other minor critique I have of this, and I've seen a lot of polling on this dating back to 2022, is you really want to say MAGA Republicans, not Trump Republicans. Trump Republicans is actually more popular than MAGA Republican when you're describing other Republicans, because Trump brings with it sort of an outsider populism that is more appealing to independents than just the term MAGA, which means like extremist January 6th type election denier. There was a lot of testing on this in 2022, which led to the White House and Democrats leaning into that MAGA extremist, MAGA Republican label. And so like one minor critique on it. But other than that, it's like a worthwhile contribution to the discourse, I think, in this ad.
You know, there are a number of voters out there who are independents and moderates who don't actually think Trump is really responsible for the current landscape in terms of reproductive freedom in America. They objectively know that he installed the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade, but they don't lay that at his doorstep in the same way. In part, maybe because they don't believe he's a man of any particular principle. Yeah. They don't believe maybe he's an abortion warrior, the way some of the anti-choice, movement truly is, sort of dyed-in-the-wool Christian conservative warriors. But either way, it is an issue that drives Democrats to the polls because they care about the issue. But in terms of it being weaponized against Trump, it has been, I think, a little bit more difficult than Democrats would like to acknowledge, to pin it on Trump's lapel, as it were.
The idea that he's this cat who cheats on his wife, and we're right now in the middle of a trial about covering up an affair, that he doesn't code as like a Rick Santorum or a Mike Johnson, the way in which a lot of voters think of these far-right Republicans. And so that's why it's another good reason Newsom is doing this ad. All right, people, if you watch this show for a long time, you know I'm frequently asking you to smash the subscribe button on the Pod Save America YouTube channel, which you should absolutely still do. It's very important. But today I'm going to ask you to subscribe to something else. The Message Box is a newsletter I've been writing for nearly 4 years. It's a resource for political messaging and strategy for people on the front lines of politics, whether you're working on a race, running for office, or just trying to convince your Biden skeptical cousin not to vote for RFK Jr. If you're a fan of Pod Save America and this show, I promise you'll enjoy the Message Box. So do yourself a favor, and frankly, you'd be doing me a favor by smashing the Message Box link in the description below. Okay, the next ad we're going to watch is from the Joe Biden campaign.
My name is Joe Kennedy.
I'm Carrie Kennedy.
Troy Kennedy.
Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
Chris Kennedy. And I'm here to proudly endorse Joe Biden.
Joe Biden. Joe Biden.
Our future is on the ballot in a way in which we haven't seen in generations.
The only way to win this election is for everybody to go out and vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
When I think of modern politicians in our country in this century, I think Joe Biden is the RFK of his generation.
Believes in democracy, believes in human rights, believes in the freedoms.
This is a president who embodies the Kennedy legacy.
This ad, not very subtly, going after independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., going to make for some awkward holidays at his family abode. What do you think of the ad?
It smacks a little bit of desperation. It's not that I necessarily fault the Biden campaign for putting this ad out there. It's just so painfully obvious what they're trying to do. And it, I think, miscalculates the appeal of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Yes, there's some subsection of the electorate that remembers the Kennedy name and legacy that is driven towards RFK's candidacy for that reason. But I think the majority of people are looking for an alternative to Trump and Biden because they just don't like either guy. And Robert F. Kennedy is definitely outside the mainstream. Having a bunch of, having Camelot circle the wagons and say, our guy is Joe Biden sort of misses the point here. The Kennedy appeal is, in a weird way, both a sort of semi-dynastic appeal with voters who are of a certain age, but I think largely the outsider appeal. It's one thing and it's opposite at the same time. So having a bunch of sort of Kennedy scions tell you why the RFK ain't RFK, it's actually Joe Biden, I don't think it gets to the heart of the problem. Beyond that, I just find when did they record these endorsements? There's so much background noise. It's
I think it's backstage of the endorsement event, yeah.
I kind of wish if they were going to go there was a little bit more production value and it was a bit more hagiographic, for lack of a better term, because, you're talking about these big figures in American politics and this family that theoretically means so much to America and her story. And yet it sort of feels like they were pulled in front of a black curtain at a green room event, like a fundraiser for Joe Biden. And the arguments they make are not particularly compelling.
This to me, was largely a press gimmick more than anything else. They did the very clever thing of having the Kennedys over for St. Patrick's Day or Easter or something recently, and then...
Yeah, St. Patrick's Day, I think you're right.
Then they did this endorsement event, and then you sort of, they're here, and we got cameras, we might as well do this, and we'll put it out to the press and get our thing more attention. I don't think this is a thing they're going to put money behind, but I think you are 100% right that it does smack a little bit of misunderstanding the electoral environment. Kennedy's name helps because it just he's someone you've heard of. If he was just like John Smith, it wouldn't matter that much. The people who are going to him are people who are upset with the political establishment, and a bunch of establishment figures endorsing him does not help. The better argument that I've heard from people who are working on the anti-third party element is that he's a spoiler for Trump. He's got these MAGA views about January 6th. His biggest funder is one of the biggest funders, the Trump's super PAC. Steve Bannon helped encourage him to run for president.
Even his position on some Middle Eastern, Israel, Gaza stuff, I mean, there's a lot there. And that seemed like a vein that has been unmined and is by far, I think, the most effective argument against Kennedy's candidacy.
There's a little bit of a fear right now of elevating him while he's seeking ballot access, because it would raise his name ID. And so when someone's standing outside a supermarket in Detroit or Phoenix or wherever else trying to get ballot signatures, and they have never heard of the guy, but now they know because you've Streisanded affected him into relevance. I can't imagine any Democrat will make the mistake of 2016 of not trying to define what a third-party vote means, right? That was the fundamental strategic error in 2016 was you didn't want to talk about Jill Stein, because if you talked about Jill Stein, you would raise her name ID, but you need to convince people why not to do that.
I think precisely because of 2016 and 2000 for that matter, there is so much PTSD around third-party candidates, and everybody's going into this race understanding it's going to be extraordinarily close. So even now, before Kennedy's really on the ballot, there's been much more, I think, conversation about the risk he poses to honestly, to both candidates. So the conversation has begun. We'll see if the ads get better.
All right, people, I'm here to tell you about a game-changing product that I use all the time. It's called ZBiotics. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle tough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. As we were recording this, I'm heading to DC for the Crooked Media party at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The very first thing I packed was my ZBiotics. It's because I plan to have a drink or two at that party, and I have an early flight on Saturday morning, and I want to make sure I feel my best. So I'm making sure I bring my ZBiotics, a product I take every time I go out. Go to ZBiotics.com/experts to get 15% off your first order when you use experts at checkout. ZBiotics is back with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Thanks to ZBiotics for sponsoring this video. All right, the third ad we're going to watch is from the Republican Accountability Project, a favorite of Political Experts React.
I was wondering if you guys are hiring right now. I was thinking about applying for a job. I was thinking about applying for a job here. I'm currently facing 88 felonies. For detention of classified information. Do you all take people that have been found liable for sexual assault, trying to overturn the 2020 election, falsifying business records? I was wondering if that was going to be a problem.
Working with diamonds and jewelry.
They're gonna do a background check.
Yeah.
So that's the only.
So probably not.
Yeah.
So did you guys hire people that have been found liable for sexual assault, or?
We run a phone background.
Okay.
No, we don't.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Donald Trump has been charged with 88 felonies and found liable for sexual assault. If Trump is too big of a liability to get a job at your local mall, he is too big of a liability to be president of the United States. Republican Accountability PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Subtle, I would say. What do you think?
Logically, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's well done. I love the concept. I am on the fence about whether this actually moves anybody, in part because, you know, the more we study this electorate, the more it really feels like if it's not something that directly impacts you or someone you know quite well, is it really going to land? And I think the general argument about democracy matters. It should be had. We cover it relentlessly on the network I work for. And any infringement upon a representative democracy should be studied and covered and debated and all the rest. But as an issue that moves voters, like the idea of a potentially convicted felon or someone with 88 felony charges to his name being elected president, I don't know if it's too nebulous to really get people to pull the lever for Biden or not pull the lever for Trump. And I know the polling out there says that the convictions matter, that among independents and swing voters, it will matter, and it would cause some sizable, which is to say not negligible portion of the Republican Party to not vote for Trump. But I don't know. I'm a little skeptical that when it comes down to it, Republicans and Republican voters in particular don't care more about their taxes and what they think of as a better quote-unquote Trump economy, completely baselessly, whether that doesn't trump, pardon the metaphor, any concerns about a criminal being in the Oval Office.
This ad, so Republican Accountability Project, their target are basically Republicans who voted for Joe Biden in 2020, who were thinking of going to Trump in 2024, or people who voted for Trump in 2020 who were very upset by January 6th. You know, some of these are Nikki Haley voters. Like, for that group, I think this is a good message. How could we possibly hand the presidency back to this person? Like, what is a way that makes that evocative and understandable to people? I think this is a very clever way of doing that. We are doing things on such narrow margins here, right? And this is the most interesting election in the way in which I think it's upending the way we think about messaging. Everyone is at the 1 yard line. They're just trying to get over. And it's like, we need a little from column A and a little from column B. And we got to keep these young voters concerned about Gaza over here. And we got these RFK voters who agree with Biden on everything, but are frustrated about this. We got to bring them back. And then there are these Trump Biden voters. We got to get them. And, you know, it's just a lot of tactics within the margin. I think this is a pretty good one. Now, the counterpoint to that is the ad that became sort of emblematic of everything that went wrong in 2016. As you remember the ad of the kid watching Donald Trump be Donald Trump on television. It's like the role model ad. That really wasn't the thrust of the Clinton campaign messaging, but that sort of became like how we all missed the boat, is we focused on that instead of whatever else. And so there are elements of that here. And if the Biden campaign were running this ad, they went up with $1 billion of this ad, you know, during the Green Bay Packers Detroit Lions game in the fall, I would be concerned about that. But for this narrow audience, I think it's a pretty good argument. And it's run by people who are very data oriented, so that clearly test well.
Yes, and I think you're so right to point out who is taking it out and the very narrow slice that they're going for. I think it's people who were concerned about January 6th, who understand it, who have to be refreshed and re-enraged about the fact that this person has risen from the ashes and is now the Republican nominee. It's a great ad, and it really hones in on this spectacularly appalling moment we find ourselves in, and specifically the Republican Party finds itself in. A person who could not get a job at a jewelry store in the mall is going to potentially have the nuclear codes and access to high-level security clearance. I mean, it's just, here we are.
Here we are. Alex Wagner, thank you for joining us once again on Political Experts React. We will talk to you again soon.
It's such a pleasure, Dan. I learn something new every time I talk to you.
As I do with you. Thanks for watching these ads and videos with us. If you have anything you'd like us to break down, let us know in the comments. See you all next time.